and I'll do just okay. On behalf of Foundation for India, Indian Diaspora Studies, I would like to welcome all of you to this very important panel, and at a very important occasion. We are in a way that we are in a historic and very critical time frame that probably centuries haven't witnessed. It's very critical race, as we all know. And the US India, the US election is important not just for the US but for the whole world. So the eyes of the whole world is actually on this election. And yesterday's debate was one of the most important event. It was looked forward by all Americans. And as we know that the first debate, which was between President Biden and President Trump, the results or the performance were much more lackluster, resulting into President Biden withdrawing and then nominating Vice President Kamala Harris. And yesterday's debate was much more different than the first debate. So we'll start with your take on the debates. Then we'll also look at the how the your understanding about the current race, where it stands before and after the debate, and how does it span out in your opinion, the panelist opinion, in next 58 days. On this occasion today, we have four panelists. We have Ajay Jain Bhatoria. As we all know that he is one of the prominent Democrat, and he has been one of the highest top-ranking fundraiser from the Indian American community in the Biden campaign earlier also, and now in Kamala Harris campaign. He's also member of President's Advisory Council on North and Pacific Islanders. He has been doing awesome work on the immigration. We worked together for a long time. We have Bhavini Patel. She had one of the most exciting primaries and well fought, and it was wonderful. Hope that she will next time do better, and we'll see her in a Congress. Now we also have Niraj Antani. He is a Ohio State Senator. He was earlier Ohio State Assemblyman. He awesome Republican, represent well connected with Indian American all over the US. I remember that in a very short time, in January, he decided to contest, and a huge fundraiser was conducted. And so much so, he's being loved as a very great. Only thing that period was very short. I hope that he does it better in the future. And we have Kaps Sharma. So who is from, you can think that he's a think tank, Atlantic Council fellow, but he also has a very long career. He has been in government affairs almost for probably 2 decades, mostly representing tech companies in Washington, D.C. and around in the policy circles. So I have a great panel, and we all know that Yogi is FIIDS policy director and very active, and he is going to be the main moderator, but I'm just initially facilitating this conversation. So the sequence would be that we'll start with Ajay Bhatoria, followed by Bhavini Patel, then Kapil Sharma, and then Niraj Antani. So with this, let's start. But Yogi, you want to make some opening couple of minutes comments, and each panelist can speak probably 2 to 3 minutes. 3 minutes will be adequate because there is a three at least different aspect you may be covering. Yogi, please go ahead.
Wonderful, Mr. Khanderao. Thank you so much. This conversation is very timely. Having this panel is a very, a good power panel of people who understand politics. And it's this conversation about where we are headed as a nation. And I think that the Indian American community is paying very close attention to this. This election is about battleground states. This election is about the potential margin for victory. But we felt that it was important to have this conversation. So, Ajay, obviously, Khanderao has given the introduction and certainly will pay heedance to what the Democratic Party is thinking right now. Bhavini, certainly you've been a candidate on the ground, so you understand elections, you understand the vote from the base, vote from the hardline support, and then independents that sometimes are critical votes. And Niraj Antani, obviously from Ohio, another important state. Cap, you've been in the forefront of politics for a long time. For all of our listeners, you may or may not know about Cap, but the Indian American Caucus in the Congressional U.S. Congress, frankly, Cap has something to do with it. When he was working for Congressman Frank Pallone at that time, Cap helped launch the India Caucus in the United States. So we should have a separate conversation on that one day. But today, let's begin this conversation about the historic nature of this Democratic-Republican head-on-head with Kamala Harris and Vice President Kenneth Waltz and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. So Ajay, let's talk about the Democrat perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Khanderao and Yogi, for having me here. As we saw yesterday in the debate, and as we have been witnessing in last few weeks, Kamala Harris is the change candidate for the new way forward. There's a fresh air with her, and she's about moving forward and about the future, while Trump is about the past. Trump is about chaos, and but Kamala is about competency. It's the fight between daylight and darkness. 200 plus Republican leaders have endorsed Kamala, and all of former or most of former Trump team of 2016 have left him. There's so much clear contrast between Kamala and Trump. We know Kamala has what it takes to move our country forward. She will be prioritizing helping working families over billionaires and big corporations. She'll be fighting for every American, no matter who they are, how they choose to live their lives. It is simple. Kamala is pro-worker, pro-business, and pro-family. She just released her economic plan, where she talks about giving 50,000 incentive for startups and small businesses. And she talks about giving 25,000 credit for first-time home buyer with certain conditions applied. She talks about giving child credit of $6,000, and she wants everyone to succeed in this economy, an economy of opportunity. She will be talking about moving us, the American people. She talks about moving us American people forward. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have fundamentally different views of who our economy should work for. She believes it should work for working people, the middle class, and the small businesses, while Trump, is focused on giving incentives and cuts and tax cuts for corporations and his billionaire buddies. Kamala Harris is committed to protecting our fundamental freedoms and is fighting to restore the protections of Roe versus Wade as law of the land. If she wins in November, she already said that she will work to make sure that Roe versus Wade is the law of the land. Donald Trump routinely lies about his position to distract from his own extreme unpopular Project 2025, where he talks about completely removing the education department, talks about having a national ban on abortion, talks about withdrawing from NATO, and so many other things. I mean, so Vice President Harris supports taking action to secure our border, including one taken by Biden-Harris administration that have caused border crossings to the lowest in the recent history. And Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans killed the toughest and the fairest immigration and the border bill. So there's a clear contrast, and Kamala Harris is what it takes to move the country forward. And the country is so excited about it. And we see this in Michigan, Wisconsin, where thousands and thousands of people are being part of our campaign events. And we're so excited about it.
Wonderful, Ajay. Thank you. We'll have some questions that we're going to ask as well, but thank you very much for your opening statements. Bhavini, why don't we lead on to you? And obviously, you bring a unique perspective. You're from the great state of Pennsylvania, so would love to hear your observations and your comments right off the bat as well. You need to unmute.
There we go. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for the opportunity to join this panel and to be with all of you. It's really wonderful. As mentioned, I was a candidate in the Democratic primary here in Pennsylvania's 12th congressional district. The incumbent is actually Congresswoman Summer Lee, and it was actually quite a contentious race. I've obviously been following the presidential election, and I think that Ajay did a really phenomenal job of outlining why Democrats are so excited about Vice President Kamala Harris and her policies and how she is oriented towards thinking about the future. I think I can probably make a pretty safe bet and say that I'm probably the youngest individual on this panel. I'm probably the youngest person in this Zoom room. And so when I think about my congressional race and some of the challenges that I faced as a young Hindu American woman that was born in the United States, but so proud of my culture and, the values that my mother instilled in my brother and I as a single parent, and the challenges she faced in this country, I think it truly comes down to the idea that, we need to make sure that we are educating young Indian Americans and young Hindu Americans of the importance of our culture and our values. If we are going to talk about building political power in this country and really solidifying the relationship between the United States and India, then it fundamentally comes down to controlling the narrative and talking about why Hinduism is a progressive faith that values building up people. It values everything that Ajay talked about that Kamala Harris represents in her candidacy. And so, when I think about, November and feel very confident about how the Democrats are going to do, and it's an exciting time. I'm looking forward to January, and I'm thinking about the millions of people in this country that are going to be Googling and searching and wanting to read about Vice President Kamala Harris and her background. And, what are they going to read about when it comes to her connection to India and her connection to the Hindu faith? And I think that we have an opportunity there to really control the narrative and to write the story of why it's important to advocate for our faith, but also talk about it in terms of electoral politics and what we can do to create change in this country. I come from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is home to Carnegie Mellon University, the University of Pittsburgh. There are thousands of students that come here from India to build their lives here. They get educated, and then they ultimately, thankfully, make the decision to build lives here. They buy homes, they get married, they raise their kids here. There are entire generations of people that want to see their backgrounds, their faith, their culture, and their values represented in an inclusive administration. And I really do think that Vice President Kamala Harris represents those values. And it's an opportunity more than anything for everybody on this Zoom call and for the millions of Hindu Americans, Indian Americans in the United States to build a narrative where we're bringing people in and showing people that we can stand on the political stage and drive policy change for the betterment of this country and for the betterment of everybody.
Well, Bhavini, thank you very much. I think you took the larger context of why this election is a historic election and what it means to not only the participants in the Zoom room, but those that will be seeing this live stream as we're going to distribute this over to the membership across the broad spectrum of this country. But thank you very much for those comments. We will ask each one of you some questions as well. That's been at the forefront of everybody's mind. Full disclosure, I am a Democrat, but today I have a very difficult job, and my difficult job is to pose the questions in order to ensure that we're asking the questions pertaining to how we see this election. How do we come out of this debate going into the election? How will those opportunities unfold? And really from a community standpoint, Indian American community at a larger level is like no other voter. It's the same voter. It thinks about the key issues that impact our daily lives. Kapil, I'm going to now take this to you. You identify yourself as an independent. You saw the debate last night, but you've been seeing what's been happening in this election post Biden and Kamala becoming the nominee now for the presidency and the debate yesterday. What are your observations as you see this?
Thanks, Yogi, and thanks, Mr. Khanderao, for inviting me to talk about this. And I want to put the debate in context for everybody here that's listening to us discuss it. And I found, and I did some research, and I actually talked to quite a few people around the city to kind of be better informed about how they also viewed the debate. First and foremost, I think it's across the board. I don't think anybody believes that Trump did well last night. He clearly lost the debate, however you define as losing. And if you look at the evening headlines here in Washington, D.C., Republicans are engaging in a blame game, pointing fingers as to why Trump lost. He failed to drive home key campaign messages and points that they had laid out before the debate. He looked unprepared and was operating more from his gut. He uses his traditional speaking style of a campaign speech, and it was clear he was using campaign words, and he was talking really towards his base. And if you were bold enough to stay up, or if you stayed up through the end of the debate, you would have seen Republicans in the spin room trying to say that this was a draw. It was eerily very similar to what Democrats were trying to do when Biden had that disastrous debate in June, where his spin people were also saying that it ended in a draw. Personally, Harris's campaign people should have been pleased with what she did. I genuinely was surprised. And I was also actually surprised that right after the debate, she asked for another debate, which President Trump did decline. Now, I think that her asking for a debate kind of shows where is her campaign thinking she stands right now. Actually, the other reason why I was surprised that she asked for a second debate was that there's no guarantee that she would have a similar performance, or whether she would be that good, or whether Trump would be that bad. So now this is why you should look at the numbers as to what happened after her performance. She received nominal bumps from the debate last night, even though she did an excellent job. And if you think about it, the vice president had an excellent convention speech as well. I don't think most people would say she had a poor convention speech, and the polls didn't really move much either. And she kept actually to the same themes that she gave during the convention speech, which was talking about China, lethal fighting, jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you read that? So how should you think about why didn't she get a better bump? The debate had 60 million viewers, but while there were 60 million viewers, here's the key point we should think about what happened at the convention and what's happening at the debate last night. It was really a debate for the 200,000 some odd swing voters in 7 states around the country. This was not a debate for the country as a whole. This was a debate to see who could win 200,000 voters in those 7 states. That's why with Bhavini and Niraj's thoughts and views are going to be very important, because they are members of those particular swing states. So you're not going to see a bump in the polls because the window of what you're talking about or who you're targeting is very small. Trump voters are Trump voters. Harris voters are going to be Harris voters. That independent swing in those 7 states is really 200,000 people. Now, why did myself and a few others come to that conclusion? Look at the topics they talked about. They talked about fracking. Do people in New Jersey care about fracking? Do people in Florida care about fracking? That's why I think it was weird. While it was weird that the President Trump brought up cats and animals and Haitians, it's an issue in Ohio. It's not an issue in New Jersey or California or North Dakota. I think one of the key and more amazing lines last night from Vice President Harris was when they were talking about Russia and Ukraine. She mentioned the 800,000 voters in the state of Polish voters in the state of Pennsylvania. It's very targeted. It's very specific. It was for those swing states. Now, if I'm on a Harris team, where I'd be a little bit concerned is that, while again, she won hands down, she did a great job. When they did post polling on the debate, Trump still won on the economy. He did well on the economy, and regardless of how you feel about key issues like tariffs and others, we could debate all of that if you like. It was still a very simple way of talking about the economy, and his message, I think, made it through. And I think also his last point, which also polled very well, which he surprisingly didn't do throughout the entire debate, is everything that she talked about. Why hasn't she done it for the last 3.5 years? Or what some Republican spin people have been talking about is Democrats have been controlled 16 out of the last 20 years. Why haven't they done all these changes? Now, one of the key things that I saw last night is that since the debate, she has had a huge fundraising bump. And in fact, since being the nominee, she has beaten Trump 3-1 for every dollar raised. And from my understanding, today was one of the best fundraising days for Act Blue. So when I think about the debate, when I think about Kamala and her performance, the vice president and her performance, it's not only for her, but it's also down ballot vote races too. So if Bhavini had gotten through the primary, I think she'd be ecstatic right now because it would probably be very helpful for her in her general election. But, you know, she also has to raise a lot more money because she has 2,000 people on her campaign staff, whereas Trump has decided to go with a much smaller campaign team and canvassing outside. So here's my bottom line, or the couple of things that I would just leave you with in the final 10 to 15, 20 seconds. Polls are really bad because for some reason, the last two elections, the polls have undervalued Trump's support. And we've seen that in a lot of the key swing states. Every time at this point, the Democratic nominee was up on Trump, but when it came to actually voting, Trump surpassed all expectations. So he continually underpolls. That bothers a lot of my Democratic pollster friends here in DC. Most of America still doesn't know Vice President Harris, so that still goes well for her, and she presents very well. The last two major opportunities that she had it, Trump has not. Were Trump supporters surprised by his performance? Probably not. But I think the key point that we have to walk away with from her last two performances is, did she do enough to take some of the 200,000 independent voters that are sitting in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin? I'm sure Niraj has some thoughts on that since he's on the ground there. But what I took away was that was not a debate for all Americans. That was a debate for 200,000 people in 7 states.
Great, Cap. Thank you for your very astute observations. Senator Antani, let's talk about your Republican perspective in Ohio. Boots on the ground, your comments about the debate and the general state of election, the affairs of the state of elections for this upcoming election 58 days away.
Well, thank you. First, thank you, Khanderao and FIIDS, for having me and hosting this, and great to see you, Yogi, as well, and also my Democratic friend, Ajay, who does great work for the U.S.-India relationship in his party, and my friend Kapil. And Bhavini, we haven't met. I followed your race very closely, and as a fellow Gujarati, was very proud of you. We need more Democrats like you and less like Summer Lee. I will say that, and I will tell you that I used to be the young person too, but now at 33, I apparently am not the young person anymore. Look, setting aside all of the rhetoric and the bluster and the bravado, when President Trump was president, we had 4 years of a strong economy and peace in the world. Under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we've had a terrible economy with record inflation and 2 regional wars in Israel, Hamas, and Russia and Ukraine that threaten American security and American interests. This is not a world that people want. And like Kapil said, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have had 3.5 years now to solve the inflation issue, to solve the economy. They have not done that. They've had 3.5 years to stop these regional conflicts and to stop them from escalating and to stop them from starting. They have not done that. And people, frankly, are going to look at that contrast and see President Trump's 4 years of peace and prosperity. And if we talk about the U.S.-India relationship, we had a great U.S.-India relationship during President Trump's time. President Trump went to India. We know, obviously, countless times he's hosted Prime Minister Modi here, but he went to India. Kamala Harris, in 3.5 years as vice president, has not visited India. She talked last night about the many, many world leaders she's met with. She did not visit India. I think that is a big problem for our community. She's done nothing to talk about the Bangladeshi Hindu issue that is going on that many people in our community care about. President Trump, when he was president, hosted a roundtable that included a Bangladeshi Hindu talking about persecution when he was president. When we talk about, I'll move on to the debate last night, and Kapil is an old friend. I will have to vehemently disagree with my friend. I thought President Trump did what he needed to do. Remember, this isn't about like Kapil, what Kapil was right in saying, this wasn't a viewer for me or for you. It's a viewer for the independent voters, like you said, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Arizona, etc. And if you're an independent voter and you saw President Trump, I thought he had a fine performance. He did what he needed to do, which is to make his points for what he wanted. Now, we have to remember, this was Kamala Harris's first exposure on a national scale, other than her convention speech. This was her first post-Labor Day exposure to these independent voters, and I thought she fell flat. She spent the entire time using the tried and tired attack lines on President Trump that Americans have heard now for 10 years. We've heard these attacks for 10 years, and she failed to give a positive vision for the country. All we know from her is what's bad about President Trump. We don't know what's going to be good under her. She failed to answer. I was surprised. I thought the moderators were very biased in their fact checking, but one thing I thought they did well is they asked Kamala Harris, they said, look, you said in 2020 you would ban fracking. Now you're saying you won't ban fracking. You said you would ban plastic straws. Now you're saying you won't ban plastic straws. You said you would be for transgender surgeries in prisons. Now you're saying you're not. What do you actually believe? And she failed to answer that. And so I thought, if you're an independent voter watching this, if you're an Indian American voter who goes back and forth or doesn't know who they're going to vote for, you don't know what she stands for. And that is the big problem for her.
Great, Niraj. Thank you. Thank you for your opening comments. I'm going to start off the conversation now by coming back and saying that post-debate, mainstream media and cable last night, the conversation was very different from what it was today. I think the euphoria after a debate is typically Democrats talking about how their candidate did extremely well, and the Republicans came back and saying their candidate did what he was supposed to be doing. Well, the two things I heard yesterday that Kamala Harris overperformed. She made a very good case for calm and composure and a little bit about the economic policies, and Trump came back and talked about the issues that he think were important. And to Niraj's point, he came back and clearly made the case why she was unable to make those changes when she's been in office on the Biden-Harris ticket. But here's the question I'm going to ask. It seems to me that the four important issues on this election today are abortion, the economy, immigration and borders, and then endless wars, Ukraine and Russia in particular, and these came up. Ajay, from your perspective, do you think that Kamala Harris spoke eloquently to those issues that are in the forefront? What I would think is the majority of the listeners, but more particularly the independents, did she speak about the economy? Did she speak about immigration? Did she speak about abortion? And did she speak about the endless wars?
Absolutely, Yogi. Thank you. She did speak about these issues. She clearly showed that there are two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, which is Kamala Harris' vision for a new way forward, and the other that is focused on the past, which is Donald Trump's vision to take the country back, and we are not going back. And she clearly talked about her vision, about her economic plan. She is a pro worker, as I said in my opening statement, and pro families, and she wants everybody to succeed in the economy, where she talks about building trillions of houses to address the housing shortage, to provide small businesses, so that millions of small businesses are created. She talked. She didn't talk yesterday, but she has released her economic plan, in which she talked about how small businesses should be have the ability to get the federal contracts. She talks about how the startup should be getting $50,000 credit, and so on and on. There's so much opportunity for small businesses. When the small businesses and middle class grows, America grows. She talks about supporting the unions, and she talks about moving us forward. And she talks about supporting Roe versus Wade for abortions, and she talks about getting a bill passed, which the MAGA Republicans have killed, for the resolving the border issue and the immigration issue. And And to talk about some of my comments made by some of my friends, if I may continue, is that U.S.-India relationship has grown to one of the most strongest. President Biden and Vice President Harris hosted President Modi in the White House. It was for the first time 5,000 plus Indian Americans were in the South Lawn chanting Modi, Modi and Vande Mataram. And that was one of the most, if anybody who was there in that time, was the most emotional moment to see our community come forward there, and our Prime Minister of India being so well respected and well received by President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, with a state dinner, with a state lunch, and so many other things. And so many things came out of that, where that was a defense deal, which was the first time where the defense equipments were provided, the engine technology, GE technology was shared, and so much advancement between the growth of the businesses has happened between the two countries, which is continuing to grow in the next administration. So I'll stop here. Okay.
Great. Niraj, if you are available, I'd like you to be able to talk about the questions about abortion, immigration, wars, and basically the economy and the border. How would you respond to Ajay?
Really, it's the economy and the border that are going to drive votes. We know that, large in part people vote based on the economy. I do think in this election, because of the, Biden-Harris disaster, the humanitarian crisis at the border, that is a driving issue. People really don't vote on foreign policy, although many of us on this call, we all agree and understand how important that just doesn't drive votes. And then, abortion, I think, yes, it'll drive the evangelical community and then, college educated women. But other than those two segments, it really isn't an issue that, the average voter perhaps is going to consider. But yes, it will matter in suburban, white women, college educated. But look, on the economy, we know the numbers. I don't think any American will say that the economy is better today than it was under President Trump. President Trump released a chart last night, his team, showing the price increases on all goods and services over the Biden administration. And Kamala Harris has had 3.5 years to do that, to fix that, to have input, and hasn't moved the needle. And then on the border, it is a disaster. I would, again, the Springfield, Ohio, my district is about 30 minutes from Springfield. I drive through Springfield every time I pass through the State House and home. This is an issue. These Haitians came into Ohio, into the America illegally, were given temporary protective status by the Biden administration, by the Harris administration, and now Springfield is overwhelmed, and they're seeing rising accidents, rising health issues, communicable diseases, et cetera. They have completely botched this issue. Kamala Harris was named the border czar by Joe Biden, didn't visit the border for the longest time, has done nothing to alleviate. And yes, this is an Ohio issue. I agree with that, but it can very well be an issue in your town on the drop of a dime. And that is a problem. Look, we want legal immigration. I know Ajay's doing great work on the green card backlog issue and H-1B issues. We want legal and vibrant immigration. But if you come into our southern border, you are not here legally. And we have to shut down the border. We have to get it under control. You see Democratic governors, including Katie Hobbs, the governor of Arizona, who are calling for help. You see the mayor of New York City, who is saying something has got to change, the Democratic mayor of New York City. You see Governor Pritzker of Illinois saying things have to change. If you have major Democratic governors and mayors saying something's got to change, it is very obvious that the Biden-Harris administration has failed on the issue of the border. And I do think that's going to move votes. I've been very surprised how Kamala hasn't talked more about the border. It's very easy to come out and say, look, we're going to shut down the border. We're going to increase the border patrol. We're going to stop giving people TPS and letting them into our communities. We're going to do a better job of vetting, et cetera. Yes, we want an asylum process, but an asylum doesn't mean every poor person in the world. We just can't handle that. That's not what the asylum process is there for. And so, Harris and Biden have failed on the border. They've failed on the economy. And under President Trump, that wasn't the case at all.
Thank you, Niraj. Cap, I'm going to go to you before I go to Bhavini. But from your perspective, Who do you think answered the question better on abortion, economy, immigration, and the war, Ukraine and Russia? And the larger context of who can deal with foreign leaders better?
Look, based on my history of doing campaign work and running campaigns, especially on the local side, my feeling is that it's really going to come down to one or two issues for each voter, and it will come down to the economy. In fact, one of the debates I was having today with some friends was that early voting is going to start in the next week or two. And if you're a Republican, do you want people to start voting now before the Feds cut the rates and the interest rates go down a little bit, making it easier to get a home? We're already seeing gas prices trickling down, which will make it easier in people's pocketbooks. And the reality is, I think if you're an independent, you're one of those 200,000 independents, it's just be right before you cast that vote, you're going to say, do I feel comfortable going forward about what's in my pocket? That's how we used to run a lot of our campaigns. I know Bhavini knows that. I know Niraj knows that. It's what Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. I don't think foreign policy, to be frank, plays as much in the minds of voters unless you're a specific ethnic voter, such as what's going on in Israel. Maybe Poland, maybe I guess the Harris campaign did some polling on seeing if Polish voters really are as worried about Russia going into Poland. But the reality is that I don't see that playing as much of a factor in the way people will vote more than the economy and inflation and illegal immigration. But I would like to add, I think the issue about illegal immigration is not about people being here illegally. It's about the costs on towns and cities, which then sees their local taxes go up to pay for it or other services getting cut. So it comes down to the pocketbook. And I think most people, that's how they vote. So I just wanted to say one thing. I think I do have to agree with the Biden, Harris. They've done a good job on India. Trump has done a good job on India. I think we should all be happy, everybody on this panel, that India is not a partisan issue. It is an American issue, and America's got it right. Now, I do worry that a lot of the issues on India are driven by the politicals and not necessarily the bureaucracies. And so I do fear that if the right politicals are not in place for either the Trump campaign, the Trump administration, or the Harris administration, that you could see some issues for India going forward.
That's great, Cap. I'm going to come back to you on foreign policy later, but Bhavini, your perspective on which candidate did a better job on making the case yesterday on abortion, economy, immigration, and the wars?
Yeah, there was a lot to take away in terms of those specific issues, but I think just for the sake of like an overall perspective, as someone who just recently ran, and again, all politics are local, and just sort of thinking about the on-the-ground sentiment and the sort of exhaustion that people feel from electoral politics and the nature of just extremism, I think that Vice President Harris did a really good job of really artfully and tactfully showcasing what we don't want, which is this extreme sort of politics on both sides, whether it's coming from the Republicans or the Democrats. I think that, the way that President Trump handled himself in terms of some of these basic questions really showed that he wasn't in it for the average person. And she eloquently, I think, laid out how, her life experiences, her story fundamentally relates to the average American and how she is positioned to do the work that it is necessary to bring people to the table and to fight for the values of this country. To build on that, I will also say that I think a big part of this is going to be galvanizing the young vote and getting young voters to door knock, getting them excited to energize the base. And, as somebody who, again, was running against an incumbent who aligns herself with the extreme left, I consider myself somebody who's more pragmatically aligned, a pragmatic Democrat that wants to get things done, believes in progressive solutions. I think that Kamala Harris has really made a point to attract sort of the middle of the Democratic Party, and for her to simultaneously be able to hold that strongly and bring the young vote to the table, I think really says something about about the strength of her campaign. You know, and 2 more points. You know, she has a really strong surrogate on her side here in Pennsylvania, which is Governor Josh Shapiro. He's really been out there really strongly for her, making the case. And I think that that's going to be a big advantage that we're already seeing, and I think it's going to continue to play out in coming months. She spent Labor Day here in Pittsburgh addressing labor unions. Pittsburgh is historically a labor town. We take that stuff really seriously, kitchen table issues. And I think, you know, for her to spend her time here really showcases what she values. If she's giving us her time, I think that's the most valuable thing that she can give us right now. And I think that people really appreciate that. And I think it sends a strong statement. And, you know, I think that ultimately it's continuing to build on that sentiment. I think that that's what's going to position her really well.
That's great. Ajay, Niraj said something that I've heard a lot on the news channels and cable channels and even some of the podcasts, that she was a part of the Biden administration. She often talked about how she was the last person in the room. How does she give America the hope that she's going to offer different solutions than what they offered in the last 3 years? How do you refute that conversation? Because that's what they're saying. The independents are probably struggling right now, and it's evident that 60% of the independents are still undecided about this election, and hence why it's still showing a very narrow polling, in spite of the fact that it was a very close debate yesterday, or the debate was that Kamala Harris did far better and Trump did really, really bad.
Absolutely. I mean,
what do you say to them?
Yeah, being last person in the room, she would be advising the president on things which are important for the country, as Vice President Biden was advising President Obama when he was the president. And ultimately, it was up to President Obama to make the choices to how the country should be run or on particular policy issues. But as most Americans I'm looking at one of the Financial Times data, and they're saying that most Americans trust Kamala Harris to handle the U.S. economy than Donald Trump. And the new polls shows that there's a sharp change in voter sentiment following President Joe Biden's withdrawal from the White House race, and people trust her on the economy, on how she's going to handle. And she has already released her economic plan. Trump only talks about, yesterday in the debate, he said he has a concepts of how he would handle replacing Obamacare. He doesn't have a plan. He has concepts. So he has no plans around economy, no plans around. He only wants to. He's killed the border issue, which we all agree that things should be done better in the border. And President Biden and Vice President Harris had a very detailed bill on the border, and they killed it. So people do trust her new way forward, and her policies on economy, how she's going to, and she has laid it out in very detail about what she's going to do with the small businesses. And we haven't heard anything from Donald Trump, except we should not forget it was President Donald Trump who led the Muslim ban when he was the president, who said that he's going to line up all the illegal immigrants or Latinos who have come into the country and deport them. And he under him, there was the highest amount of hate crime against Asian Americans, which he said it was a China flu or something, and that led to highest number of crime against Asian Americans, including Indian Americans. So we should not forget the 4 years of divisiveness, hate, and he handed over the worst economy to President Biden and the Vice President Harris with the highest amount of unemployment. And today there's the lowest amount of unemployment. The job numbers continues to grow, and the economy is growing. The cost of groceries and everything is coming down. As Kapil mentioned, the gas prices are coming down. And so the team is working on, and the Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, has our economic plan, which is to move the country forward.
No, that's great, Ajay. And the Trump surrogates were talking about the fact that post-COVID, pre-COVID, it was one of the strongest economies. So we're going to hear things on both sides. But Cap, what would you say to my previous question? Ajay gave a response. I think to many points, many would agree. There would be some who would disagree as well. But as an independent, do you think that criticism of her being the last person in the room and then not being able to take responsibility for the economic malaise that we have today, How will you and others in the Beltway see that issue?
Well, I mean, as an independent, I do have to think about, okay, am I going to be better off 4 years from now? Do I feel like our household, our personal or family household, is doing better than what we were doing now than what we were doing 4 years ago? My son, I'll take my son, for example, who's 18 years old. He's working pretty hard, is complaining about going out to eat all the time. And he's voting for the first time. And a lot of the issues that's going on in Ukraine and others, I know, Bhavini, you're a young person. He's a little bit younger than you, I think. But if he's struggling about going to McDonald's to eat, I think that's reflective of how a lot of people are feeling. And, because he also has, he works at Advanced Auto Parts. He's making minimum wage there. And he just wants to go out and have fun, and he's finding it hard. And that annoys me because that means I have to give him more money. So if I take that as, is he feeling better? Am I feeling better? I mean, I'll be honest, the answer is no. There are some issues in our household that do take precedent over that. So for my wife, the right to choose, freedom of choice. So that will take precedent for her over the economy. Thankfully, we do really well. So, if prices go up a little bit, we can afford it. But then, I live in a bubble too, right? I'm a top 1%er in terms of family income. But a lot of people, I think, are thinking about the economy, and all people are thinking about, can they pay for food? Can they afford to go out? And I think that's going to play a bigger role. It all depends on how people will feel the day, in my opinion, when they go into that voter's box. And while everybody was talking, I was looking through some polls and trying to see, and the three issues that come up the most with independent voters, it's inflation, economy, illegal immigration. So what Niraj was saying before, it seems to be those top three issues for independents. And I'm not sure whether she hit the mark last night on those particular issues. I just didn't see it or feel it. And by the way, neither did President Trump. I don't think either one of them did. So it's really going to come down to how you feel, not necessarily their policies.
Got it. Bhavini, historic moment, right? A woman vice president. She talks about the last person in the room. Along with that, Ajay just said that, her job is to just give advice. She's not responsible for what the president does. It would seem that you can take credit for the good things and then walk away from the horrible stuff and say I had nothing to do with that. As somebody who's relatively young, how do you see that issue? Do you think that that's fair, or do you think that's subject to criticism, which is what people turn substance?
Yeah, I think she definitely obviously is going to experience unique challenges being a woman, and I think being a woman of color and sort of having this diverse background. But I do think that last night she held her own, and I think she was incredibly strong. I think that, being a part of a historic administration, being a woman and serving as vice president, I'm sure she faced some challenges in terms of being able to have a seat at the table and, what that looks like and how her voice is heard. But I will say, I think Ajay did a really phenomenal job of outlining sort of the policy points there as it relates to the economy. But I do think fundamentally it's really important to look at what the administration also inherited. And again, going back to somebody who, was recently running and looking at the feeling on the ground and sort of the electoral perspective, I think what Kapil was saying is absolutely true, is that it's the feeling that people are going to have on the day of the election or leading up to the election. And something that is absolutely true is that people are looking for a sense of normalcy in the country. And what we saw last night should not be normalized. I think that Vice President Kamala Harris said it best. I think that she, if I quote it correctly, she said that Trump is a tragedy. And the fact that, he was given prime time to address the country in that debate and the things that were said. Our country, I think, deserves better. Our democracy deserves better. The standards need to be higher. And she represents a sense of hope for people like me and generations to come, that we can achieve better in this country, and that it's something that we should continuously try to aspire for. And I think that given everything that we faced in the last few years, and given that we're back at this point, she's perfectly fit to help us move in that direction.
Niraj, I'll let you get the Republican perspective on what you just heard.
Sure, I was
Your
unmuting
take on-
myself. Yeah, so I was just unmuting myself. Look, it's awfully hard to say that you are the vice president and you and Joe Biden are a team and we did the transportation infrastructure bill together and all of these things together, and then to turn around on the same coin and say, well, inflation isn't my fault because I can only give advice. I think the American people are smart enough to see that is a logical fallacy that doesn't meet. It is either one or the other. Either you don't get credit for anything that has happened. Now, there are those of us who think the transportation bill was bad. I am one of those. But either you take credit or you take the blame along with Joe Biden. And like Kapil said, food is more expensive. Gas is more expensive. Home essentials are more expensive. And the people feel that. And there can be as many happy people speaking on TV as you want, but you can't cash rhetoric at a bank account. Rhetoric isn't going to put food on your table. Rhetoric isn't going to pay your bills and your mortgage and your electric bill. And so at the end of the day, people are going to see this and they're going to look at Kamala Harris and they're going to say, well, what have you been doing for 3.5 years? What have you been doing for 3.5 years on the border? And I have to say, this idea that, President Trump is this, President Trump is that, and they point to rhetoric and yes, he has, bravado type rhetoric. I understand that. I'm aware of that. But when you look at what happened in those 4 years, it was a great economy and trying to spin COVID on him is just completely illogical. It's unfair. Yes, at the end of the year in 2020, because of COVID, people lost their jobs because of COVID. That is a fact. So, as far as inheriting an economy, yes, it was COVID, and Joe Biden got the job increases because COVID was entering its final phases because President Trump was able to get the vaccine up and running and to reopen the economy. But the fact is that inflation wasn't anywhere near what it is currently. Now, I will say one more thing. The other problem with what happened last night is this rhetoric on the Democratic side. We as Republicans get attacked for rhetoric, but this whole threat to democracy language is very dangerous. I'm going to say something that I'm sure my Democratic friends disagree with, but that directly led Joe Biden's rhetoric that President Trump is a, quote, threat to democracy, end quote, that I obviously disagree with, led to him getting shot, led to political violence. And that rhetoric needs to stop. Even Joe Biden came out that evening and said, we need to stop this rhetoric. But Kamala Harris continues to use this very dangerous, very divisive rhetoric. It's hard for me to see that she's the unity candidate that's going to heal our wounds in this country when she calls President Trump these very, very bad words.
Got it. So, Khanderao, I think we're now at the tail end of the conversation. We're 4 minutes away from the end, but may potentially go a little longer. But when you and I were talking, one of the conversations that we wanted to also have was, what's the way ahead between now and the next 58 days? Ajay, what do you think?
One of the things that I wanted to just ask, particularly when we have Bhavini and then we also have Niraj from the swing state, and President Trump really focused on the fracking, and then there was a questions around that. So how much basically the whole debate, how much really is impacting Pennsylvania in that segment? Similarly, he brought up Ohio, particularly calling to the Springfield cases and illegal immigrants impacting local economics, etc. So that and also border states. So finally, as Cap said, that it comes down to the swing votes and swing states. So what do you see the impact of this debate on particularly swing votes and swing states? And I would like to just as a very not as an elaborate answer, but just a few seconds from Bhavini and Niraj from your states, and then just basically what Kaps and Niraj says from the other states on the border issue or etc. Yeah. Anything, Bhavini?
Yeah, I think in the debate last night, she said that she would not call for a ban on fracking. And I think that that was something that was really powerful, given Pennsylvania is a key energy state. And I think that she, laid out an eloquent approach, which is that we need to be able to, move towards energy efficiency and do it in a way that makes sure that we're creating good paying union jobs, but also sustaining businesses and investing in our economy. And I think that she was a part of a powerful administration that delivered on the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is delivering on that. And I think that that's why, she is able to walk into a room with President Biden and address labor unions here in Pennsylvania. And not only that, but she spent a good few days here in Pittsburgh, right at the Omni William Penn Hotel in Pittsburgh's downtown prior to her debate. And I think, again, it's really critical. We appreciate that kind of stuff here in Pennsylvania, where you put your time really shows us where your priorities are. She made significant headlines here. She was out in the community. She was addressing small businesses. She was talking to the people. She was not just delivering on rhetoric. And again, I think that in the debate, she made that case strongly. And simultaneously, while showcasing what she's going to deliver for the country and what she's done and what her record is, she simultaneously, I think, really laid out a strong picture of what we don't want. We don't want to go back.
Question finally comes that whether it is convincing the Pennsylvania voters.
Look, I think we'll ultimately find that out on election day, but I think that she's making a strong case, and I think that she's moving in the right direction. I think that for her, again, to be able to walk into a room on Labor Day, our Labor Day parade here in Pittsburgh is something that's historic. We take a great deal of pride in our Labor Day parade here. She made it a point to come here. She could have been anywhere in the country. We appreciate that here, and I think that that's going to deliver on votes. And she probably addressed a lot of people who were on the fence on her. But her walking into that room, showcasing the empathy, the reality of who she is and where she comes from. She said it last night that she comes from a working class background, middle class America, and that she's built policies that support that. And I think it's building, it's connecting with the voter. We can sit here and talk about policy and the logic of everything, but ultimately it's how you make people feel. And if you make them feel like they're heard and they're seen, I think that that's something that's truly, really powerful.
Thank you. How about Niraj? What do you think about this, the whole Ohio case, particularly it was raised? Does it resonate, or it's an isolated case and it's not really?
Well, it's important to remember that while Ohio historically has been the most important swing state, we are maybe a tier 3 state this time. President Trump is going to win Ohio. This is a Trump state. I think, when he won't be on the ballot, whenever that may be in the future, it will go back to being a swing state. But for now, it is very much a Trump state. And again, I think, the Springfield, of course, that's all everybody's talking about, seems to be in the country, but it's really about that it can come to your town too. And that just is not what people want. Look, I think, Bhavini is the most important voter here, being in, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and then, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada after that. And then, maybe after that, we could talk about Ohio, but we're certainly not in the top 6 or 7 states anymore. We will be one day again, I think, but not right now. But look, we do have fracking here, right? Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio is where the Marcellus Shale is, where fracking takes place. And, the fact is that Kamala Harris said that she was going to ban fracking in 2020. Now she's saying she's not. We don't know what to believe. My guess is that what she said in 2020 was her authentic self. Now she's just pandering to try to win voters. And so this is a problem that she has to face that she hasn't solved for herself yet. She has not given a clear and key and coherent answer on why she keeps flip-flopping on all of these issues. And it's not just fracking, it's plastic straws, it's transgender surgeries, it's many, many different issues that she doesn't have a coherent policy about. And I do think people care about policy. Yes, they care about how they make you feel, but at the end of the day, they want you to do things to better their lives, and they want to feel like that's the case. And I don't think she's done that. And so where we go from here, look, this is President Trump's 3rd presidential campaign. They know what they're doing. And this is Kamala's now 2nd. Her first one, she didn't even make it to the ballot. And then now as vice president, but running for president is different. So, we'll see, but I will say I think it's close. And, the fact that President Trump is still polling above Kamala Harris, I think Kapil made a reference to this briefly at the beginning, it still puts President Trump in the driver's seat. And unless Kamala does something to shake up the race, he's going to continue to be in the driver's seat, and I think will eventually win. And I think that we're sort of operating from a place of strength for now.
With the interest of time, I will flip the question. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, at that time, she tried to break the glass ceiling. Now, this debate, this question was not explicitly raised or anywhere it's in campaign is not getting raised. However, there is always a silent thought. Some voters does get influenced by that. So that question around that is, there were certain questions, particularly whether the commander-in-chief dealing with the foreign officials, or whether on the tables with the world leaders on the matters of the war and negotiation, whether she would be effective or not. I'm sure that some observers or some voters might be taking notes of that. So that is something I would like to take. And now this is kind of bipartisan. I would like to go to Kaps on that, what his observation and what the performance has an impact, might have any impact on those voters who probably might be observing that particular angle.
So in the chat, I put some polling data from the Washington Post, slowly tracking afterwards about whether it swayed voters or not, and the margins seem to show that not much. Actually, the debate may have shifted some Trump voters away. That's what the Washington Post is reporting. It's not my data, that's the Post data. I sound like a broken record. I hate to sound like a broken record. It's going to come down to those 200,000 voters in those 7 swing states. I don't think it's shifted. The debate shifted much, the base voters. And so if that's the case, it's really you're going to see both candidates come around, and they're going to debate in those 7 states, and they're going to try to peel off those 200,000 voters. So, and it's going to depend on where they live. If they're living in rural Ohio, do they feel that they have a job? I was thinking about this, Yogi and I, and others have been through a lot of elections. And I remember when Bush Sr. ran against Bill Clinton, a young Bill Clinton. And if you think about when Bush Sr. was running, it was a peaceful time around the world, but the economy was really bad. And Clinton hammered him on the economy, and he won. And I think when presidents and officials start hammering on the economy, they tend to win, because ultimately people will vote on their pocketbook. And by the way, you're seeing that all around the world. You saw it in India too. Prime Minister Modi lost seats primarily because people were not feeling that they had jobs for the future in India. And the same thing is applying in Europe, and the same thing will apply here in the United States. If voters don't feel like they have a job, or they don't feel the economy is working for them, they're going to vote for something different. And did Kamala Harris show to people last night that she presents something different? I'm just not sure.
I would hand over to Yogi. I think thanks, Yogi. I think we are getting to the tail end of the panel, so you may do 1 minute roundup or close, up to you.
No, I think we'll do the last minute roundup from everybody, and what should we be watching out for between now and the next 58 days? The road ahead. Ajay, let's start with you.
I mean, so for the campaign, we have raised around record number of around almost $600 million without counting last few days. And there's been huge enthusiasm, thanks to the joy and enthusiasm that Vice President Harris and Tim Walz, Governor Walz, has brought to the table. But we, as Vice President has always said since day one, we are the underdogs in this race. We have a lot of work to do. We have to organize, mobilize, and get every vote out in those important states, which everybody has been talking about. The Electoral College benefits the Republican ticket. Even in 2020, when the Biden-Harris ticket won more votes than any ticket in the history, the election came down to about 45,000 votes across the battleground states. So this November, we anticipate the margin is going to be razor thin, and every single vote will be counted. So even the 4.5 to 5 million South Asian votes are very important and critical in the battleground states. They could be the margin of victory. So the idea is to organize, mobilize, reach out to voters, and earn their votes and win this election.
That's great, Bhavini. 58 days ahead. What should we be as a community being paying attention to, and what's your advice to Kamala Harris?
I mean, I think we're really excited after last night as Democrats. I've already been door knocking. I'm going to continue to door knock. I'm going to work on energizing the Indian American community, the Hindu American community here to get behind Vice President Kamala Harris. And, you know, I think it's also really critical that we as a community own this. I think that we have a significant opportunity to write our own narrative and really get out there and showcase our culture and our values. And I think people are paying attention. And I take that very seriously because it was something that really impacted my own race. And again, as somebody who's so young and involved in politics and is really passionate about this, I want to make sure that, you know, we're able to adequately write our story, reject sort of the extremism, and come together and ultimately, you know, build the country forward.
That's great. Niraj, the days ahead.
Yeah, well, you know, let me just first again thank Khanderao and FIIDS for hosting us, and great to see my friends Yogi and Ajay Bhatoria. And regardless of if we agree or disagree, we all are together as a community and think that, you know, we all know that it's very important that no matter what happens, it's very important to have Indian Americans on both sides, Democrat and Republican, because we see what happens when a community is one-sided. We see what's happening in the Jewish community. There's a huge fracture in the Democratic Party, and many Democrats are becoming anti-Semitic, and it's a big problem for our Jewish friends, and I feel for them, and we do not want that to happen to our community, and so that is incredibly important. Look, everybody's going to make up their own mind. You know, when it comes down to something like the presidency, it goes beyond sort of any one thing. Everybody is going to vote. It's going to be very personal. We know what they're likely to vote on. We know what Indian Americans are likely to vote. Let's just be honest, 71% of Indian Americans are likely to vote Democrat. We understand that. Now, there's been a 9-point swing between the last election and this election. So, you know, we are making more ground as Republicans, but votes are very personal, and you should do that. And you should hear from people like me and like my Democrat colleagues and make up your own mind. And that is what's important. I'll be voting for President Trump. I support President Trump. If you have questions about what President Trump believes, I'm happy to answer them. It's very hard to make your way through the muck and the lies and all of these things that, you know, many lies last night from Kamala Harris. And so, you know, if you want to talk about what is truthful, you know, we can have that conversation. I'm very, very happy to do that.
Great, Niraj. Thank you. And Cap, we're going to have you give your quick observations on the road ahead. And before we end this segment, just want to articulate, Khanderao will talk about one of the FIIDS initiative about our voter opinion and the need to engage, register to vote, and vote in this election as if your life depends on that. So Cap, the road ahead, what should we be watching out for?
I think one of the cool things is that we might have our 6th Indian American congressman coming out of Virginia. So I'm going to be watching that race very closely in Suhas. I think Ami has a tough race in Arizona, but that'll be fun to watch as well. So we might have 7, but I think it's going to be more 6. For everybody here, I know we're all excited and we're focusing on the presidential election, but I expect a split Congress, which will make anybody who wins agenda a little bit harder to execute. So there's going to be some key races, some key flipped states. So I'll be watching those races very closely, and the impact of the presidential election on down ballot votes and down ballot elections. I have a feeling that you're going to see a lot of split elections, a lot of split votes occurring. So I'm going to be watching those trends. So it's great to have the presidency, but if you have a Congress that's not going to let you or fund your agenda, then it becomes rhetoric and the country is worse off. So I keep a close look at that. And I think the governor's races, too, are going to be very interesting to watch.
Wonderful. Well, to all our panelists, Ajay, Kaps Sharma, Niraj, Antani and Bhavini Patel, thank you so much for being available on this panel discussion. And before we end this program, Mr. Khanderao Khan, would you like to share with everybody a little bit more details?
Yeah, no, thanks, Yogi, and thanks, everybody, Niraj, Ajay, Bhavini, and Kaps. Great discussion and a very diverse point, and you all very calmly and forcefully presented, very eloquently. Thankful of all of you, and Yogi for wonderful moderation. Just couple of announcements that Foundation for India Indian Diaspora Studies, we launched a survey of Indian American on the issues which important to us. And so that survey is going on. So we will be taking that, doing the analysis and presenting in probably a couple of weeks. Another one is that we also launched voters registration and then, of course, voting campaign. As a 501c3, we do not endorse or we do not advocate any kind of political party or candidate. However, we do record all the voting records of all the current sitting elected officials. We have Indo-American-Election-Guide.org that will be updated. It's still the data is from the 117 and 118 will be updated in couple of days. And we are working on the campaign through various organizations. So we are soliciting different organizations across the country, almost reaching out to 1,000 organizations to them to be a partner of this campaign, just promote the message and get their members registered for vote and participate in this election. Because as I think Yogi said, that we have 4.5 million population and significant presence in swing state. So we have wonderful opportunity, unique opportunity to make an impact. And since we have such a unique opportunity, we hope that both the campaigns do pay attention to what our asks are. And that's why the surveys and policy paper will be distributing and encouraging people to participate in the voting. So that's announcement wanted to do. And thanks once again, everybody and all these participants who participated in this. We will be putting the recorded in the good snippets because one and our presentation or panel people typically don't view it. So we'll be picking up some of the snippets and putting both on the YouTube and probably sending out. You all presented, we had good sound bites, all of you. I really liked it, and hopefully we'll be able to get some few of them and then broadcast. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.